people between the ages of 45 to 64. The proposed changes to absentee ballots will disproportionately disenfranchise those voters. I'm going to hit you with some facts about voter fraud in general. August 16, 2014, Justin Levitt, professor of Loyola Law School, expert in constitutional law with a focus on election administration, published an investigation covering the years 2000 to 2014 elections, found that out of 1 billion votes cast, that's B like Betty, billion, 31 were found to be fraudulent. I also want to remind the board that on November 13, 2020, the Federal Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency issued a statement. The November 3rd election was the most secure in American history. The head of that agency, Christopher Krebs, was hand-chosen by Donald Trump to lead that agency. Ken Block, an expert data analyst, was hired by Trump's team in November of 2020 to investigate election fraud and found zero evidence of it. Trump lost 61 of 62 of his voter fraud lawsuits, with one of his lawyers, Rudy Giuliani, saying, "We've got lots of theories, we just don't have the evidence." I'd also like to point that 80 million voters in 2020 did not vote, so the idea that people are going out of their way to commit fraud when they are eligible to vote is a bit of a stretch for me. Lastly, 2 weeks ago, at the Lex Friedman podcast, Donald Trump said, not sarcastically, that he lost the 2020 election by a whisker. We know that these proposed changes are designed to give him the advantage, and they are nothing more than voter disenfranchisement, voter suppression, and voter election and worker intimidation. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. I appreciate your words. I'm going to go ahead and call up the next five. Marcy McCarthy, Jane Branscombe, Sam Collier, Alicia Fredlin, I believe is the way it reads. So you guys can go ahead and get in line, please. And next we have Marissa Pile.
Hi, board members. My name is Marissa Pile. I'm the Senior Democracy Defense Manager at All Voting is Local Action, a nonpartisan organization that advocates for policies and legislative procedures that expand voter access, not limit it. I am testifying in opposition to both proposed Rules 183-1-14-.02 and 183-1-12-.12, both regarding hand counts in elections. These rules present a massive expansion of external risk to the accuracy and security of election results. What we are talking about in plain terms is asking for thousands of people to handle ballots before their totals are known or formally reported without virtually a single safeguard in place. Even without considering the risk of any bad actors, this injects the gross potential for human error to misplace, damage, or misreport these ballots, already being handled by exhausted and overworked poll workers. Adding in the risk of any potential bad actors could lead to situations where our election results are damaged before tabulation even begins. Indeed, the risks are stated plainly in the very rule proposal brought by Ms. Alexander. In the attached email from Secretary of State Elections Director Blake Evans, I quote, "Deciding to have poll workers hand count ballots on election night is not something your poll workers should do. In order to ensure maximum security for voted ballots, poll workers should not prolong the process of removing ballots from ballot boxes and sealing them in transport containers. This process should be done efficiently, transparently, and immediately after the polls have closed and votes have been cast. Simply put, this board and those before it cannot have it both ways. We cannot claim that it is a short chain of custody for ballots is paramount, while also passing rules that vastly expand the handling of ballots, including prior to results being calculated. What this rule means is that election staff, many of whom are here today, are wedged into an ever more crushing situation of needing to perform superhuman feats under rules that make it virtually impossible for them to do their job. There is unprecedented scrutiny on even the most minor of human missteps in our elections, and Georgians know that all too well. Further, the Georgia Attorney General has stated that these proposals are not tethered to any statute and are impermissible legislation. To close, this rulemaking process that the board has chosen reflects the allocation of precious time and resources towards solving problems that don't exist. Election staff are begging you to stop what this board is doing. Once again, we are here to consider rules that expressly go against these needs. Why? Who does this serve?
Thank you,
I
Marissa.
ask you to reject these rules.
Thank you, Marissa. Appreciate your comments. Ellen, you're up next, please.
Thank you. I am a mere lowly resident of DeKalb County, and I concur with everything that's been said so far. I object to these rules because of the increase. They increase the chance of human error in counting the ballot, and that makes it not a fair election. And the cost and time consumption to the taxpayers of Georgia is better spent elsewhere. Thank you very much.
You're as brief as I've ever seen. Thank you. Appreciate that. You set the record. You've been shut off.
You have the undying appreciation of the chairman.
All right. Let's see here. All right. Next up, we have Jacqueline Isaacson with Marcy McCarthy on deck.
Thank you. I'm from Peachtree City, which is in Fayette County. I've been a poll worker for about 4 years, including serving as assistant manager. Poll workers go through extensive training before the election. Training in my county starts next Tuesday. On the election day, there's a lot of paperwork, a lot of seals, a lot of serial numbers, and a lot of checks and balances at the opening, throughout the day, and at the closing of the polls. I'm glad to serve as a poll worker, even though it can be cumbersome, tiring, and stressful at times. All of these proposals are attempting to remedy problems that don't exist. I'll address two in particular. Hand counting on election day. There are machine counts done at check-in, every hour throughout the day, and at closing. They're done with, the check-in machines, the voting machines that people use, and the machine in which you insert your ballot. These are there are existing instructions for any irregularities that I personally have never seen. One time for the Warnock-Walker runoff election, the poll manager required us to hand count the votes, even though it wasn't a requirement and probably a little questionable. We had to do it 3 times because of human error, because the machine was right, the people weren't right. Also, poll watchers at election centers. My fellow poll workers and I receive a modest stipend, but we do this to serve. We're carrying out the election process. The proposed rules will crowd locations, cause chaos in what is already an intense yet organized process, and critically, there's a high potential for personal information being compromised and poll workers being intimidated. In closing, these changes are under the guise of transparency, but if passed, would unnecessarily encumber what are already fair and honest processes. Again, please vote no. These proposals are attempting to remedy problems that don't exist. Thank you very much.
Great job. Thank you for your time and promise on that. Next, we have Marcy McCarthy. I want to go ahead and call out some more names. Maribel Hodges, Michael Beach, Travis Doss. If you guys want to go ahead and get in line, you're certainly welcome to do so. Help everything move orderly. Marcy, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. My name is Marcy McCarthy, and I'm the chair of the Republican Party of DeKalb County, Georgia. We have spent the last 4 years working tirelessly to restore faith, integrity, and trust in our election system. Recently, William Henderson, a concerned citizen, used OCGA 21-2230 to challenge over 5,000 ineligible voters who were based on non-residential registrations and other clear violations. Many have voted from their new addresses, so we're just trying to clean these voter rolls. And this reflects just about 1/8 of the voter roll, the active voter roll population in DeKalb County. At the last DeKalb Elections Board meeting that took place on September 12th, the board flagrantly ignored federal and state laws, passing a resolution to block these challenges, rather than actually taking the time to review them as required by law. In response, Mr. Henderson and the DeKalb Republican Party have filed a lawsuit in DeKalb Superior Court on September 17th, 2024, seeking the board to follow the law and properly process these challenges. We urge the SEB to take immediate action to set clear procedures and enforce compliance with OCGA 21-230. It is absolutely critical to protect the integrity of our vote by ensuring that ineligible voters are not allowed to dilute the voice of eligible citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcy. That was very good on time and everything. So good job. Okay, next we have Jane Branscombe up. Jane?
Good morning. Candidate Trump praised three of you by name as pit bulls fighting for honesty, transparency, and victory. You are acting like pit bulls in pushing through new rules without proper transparency, input, and deliberation. And I'm sure there are many in this room who believe the drumbeat lie that there was widespread fraud in the 2020 election, who will think you're fighting for honesty and transparency. But given that the system we have has been proven over and over and over again to be free of any systematic fraud and all but the most trivial and innocent irregularities, your moves instead are promoting chaos, election worker distress, and voter anxiety. The third objective of your actions that the former president stated gets straight to the heart of the matter: victory. Specifically, his victory. Your actions attempt to stack the deck for a particular outcome, and that is the definition of anti-democratic. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you, Jane, for your comments. Sam Collier, you're up next.
Thank you. My name is Sam Collier, longtime resident of Georgia, and I'm pleased to talk to you today. It's interesting. I feel like there's two movements, two tribes in the room. There's a movement, people who are just assured that there's a problem in their direction, and some others are assured there's a problem in their direction. And so I think we're all here because we're concerned about something, and I think we ought to acknowledge that we all come here out of a sense of concern. I would say, though, that because we have two different feeds, a blue feed and a red feed, which have now turned into algorithms, if you believe something and you click on things you believe, before long you get deeper and deeper into those because the algorithm leads you in that direction. So my algorithm doesn't lead me to believe that there's widespread voter fraud that nobody has happened to find out, and $750 million later, court verdict shows that it's probably not even true, and that if you espouse that in your algorithm, you may be liable. I tend to believe that having watched polls at every step, from closing the polls to the late night, bringing all of the returns into a county headquarters, to opening absentee ballots the day after and certifying absentee ballots, that if you disrupt the process that's been worked out for so long, you will create far more chaos and far more headlines and far more lawsuits and far more grief than you ever imagined. And I would truly urge the three pit bulls to take that into account as you decide whether you're going to pass this vote today. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Appreciate your comments. Akiva Fredlin, did I get that right?
Pretty close.
Close enough.
Good morning.
Okay. We're
I'm
playing golf.
Akiva Friedland.
Friedland. Okay, very good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, honorable board members. I'm an attorney at the ACLU of Georgia, where we work to ensure that voting is easy and accessible for all Georgians. I ask you to wisely reject all 11 petitions in the rulemaking phase today, especially asking you to vote against the revisions to 183-1-12.12 about hand counting ballots in polling places, and 183-1-14.02 about hand counting at early vote locations. These amendments add needless extra burdens for our local officials. They would impose a large expense of financial resources and staff time that counties can hardly spare. They will cause further delays and risk missing crucial legal deadlines that will lead to litigation. And that is why our hardworking election officials from around the state are raising the alarm at every stage. I have also just learned that this morning the Attorney General's office sent this board a letter stating that these rules are not tethered to any statute and thus are likely the precise type of impermissible legislation that agencies like this board cannot do. I hope that you have time to read that letter before you vote today. The timing of the rules is especially problematic. By taking effect on October 10th, the rules would wreak havoc just 5 days before the early vote period begins and 21 days before the election. That's also long after September 17th, when counties have begun sending absentee ballots to our service members overseas so they can be in this process. How are we going to change rules that affect absentee ballots 23 days after counties have been instructed to start mailing them out? Again, as the AG's letter advised you this morning, it is far too late for last-minute rulemaking that will create significant confusion for voters and burdens on local administrators. Finally, one last point about the amendment to 183-1-14.02. It is incorrectly written. It references precinct poll officers, a position that does not exist during the early vote period, and it calls for precinct reconciliation of ballots, which is impossible during early voting because there you have polling places are vote centers, not precincts. Authors of petitions should know the difference, and the board should refrain from codifying people's misunderstandings. As you decide today, please put the needs of Georgia voters first, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Friedland. Next up, we have Mary Bell Hodges.
Hi, good morning, Mary Bell, Gwinnett County. I am one of the people as enumerated in the Georgia Constitution. And I think we've lost sight of a few standing fundamentals, but first I'm going to say any way that we can tighten up elections at a very local, drilled down level, that is critical to a free, fair elections, and it's critical to the people having feeling that it's transparent. The abnormal behavior that has happened over inquiry at the county level and the state level over the last 2 years of elections, that's what gives me pause. It's the abnormal behavior. Why are the ballots being held hostage? Why aren't the people who are the public servants are accountable to in Georgia, why aren't the public servants allowing us to see the accountability? So if you're so certain, if you're so 100% certain that everything is perfect in elections, show us the ballots. They belong to the people. We can do it with a custodian, but we can't even see the ballots to see a reconciliation. So yes, we need the rules at the lowest level to ensure accountability and reconciliation there. You wouldn't go to the bank teller and see her run the money through your process and walk away without counting it yourself. Our ballots are as precious as money and gold. They need to be guarded, and the people need to know. So I am in support of the bills, but this continuing of dismissing people's inquiry, just saying, well, it's a fraud, those court cases haven't even, the evidence hasn't even been looked at. So let's have a real conversation. You are public servants. You need to address what the people's concerns are, and all these people are welcome to come and speak, but election superintendents, supervisors, you are public servants as well. You are answerable to the people, not to NGOs, not to Democracy Now! You're answerable to the people. Thank you.
Hold on.
Well, they might hit that gavel again.
Next up, we have Michael Beach.
Thanks. I'm Boomer. I've got paper. My name's Dr. Michael Beach. I'm speaking as an assistant poll manager. There are only 25 days until early voting opens, and I ask you, as you've heard already, that you respect county election officials across the state who've been asking you for a 90-day moratorium on rule changes before any election. It's too late for changes. Some process thoughts. I believe board members want a process to hear full, accurate, and truthful discussion on rule changes before voting. Instead, I see a process where individuals submit proposals and often air false narratives and reference misleading or false information. I'm not aware of any other rulemaking process that hears seemingly unlimited oral presentation from the petitioner with no oral process for listening to other perspectives. I ask you to develop a process where decisions are based on a full, well-rounded, and fact-based summary for each proposal. I'd like to ask what the board's trying to accomplish when they are doing this. I haven't heard you ask petitioners, what problem are you trying to solve? What documentation says that such a problem exists? Why do we need this? We should be using accurate data and information to identify key areas for improvement, to target our limited time and resources. Attempting to make such a complex process error-free is resulting in over-bureaucratization by massing layer upon layer of rules, which may likely increase errors. We have to accept that this has become an argument between a belief that elections are not secure and the facts that they are secure. Changing beliefs cannot be accomplished easily. There will always be new beliefs requiring endless new rules. Finally, I've been through the proposed rules. I won't get into details. You've heard some of them. Much of what I see is already part of the polling place protocol. I wish petitioners would become poll workers and thoroughly study poll worker manuals so we could focus on needed improvements. So in summary, we should weigh the facts about the security of our elections, the impact of increased staff turnover, the increased difficulty recruiting poll workers, and the efficient use of taxpayer money so Georgia continues to have secure elections. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate your comments. Okay, let's go ahead and get the next 5 in line. We've got Tawny Adams, Kevin Muldowney, Kathleen Hamill, Lisa Rutherford. And we'll go ahead and do Matt Ravenzik as well. That's the next 5. God bless you.
You win a big prize. You just become the chairman's favorite.
Thank you, Ms. Rutherford. We appreciate that. And I'll go ahead and mark you as present. All right, next up we have Travis Doss.
Good morning. My name is Travis Doss, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Richmond County Board of Elections. With over 29 years of experience in election administration, I currently hold the position of President of the Georgia Association of Voter Registration and President of the Voter Registration and Election Officials. I have previously served as President of the Voter Registrars Association. I am both a certified Georgia election official and a certified election administrator. I'm here today to respectfully request that you delay your decision on the 11 proposed rules currently under consideration. Federal law mandates a 90-day quiet period for any changes to voter registration and core election procedures. State law requires a 60-day notice for polling place changes and precinct adjustments. Current SEB regulations necessitate a 30-day notification of any voters if you are changing a polling place. Should you approve these rules today, they will not legally take effect until October the 11th, leaving us only 25 days until Election Day. 25 days is an extremely limited window, especially when we are this close to the election. This is akin to entering the 3rd trimester of pregnancy nearing the due date. Now is simply not the time to implement sweeping changes that could create unnecessary confusion and disruption. As recent history shows, election changes made in the final stage often becomes the focal points of post-election controversy. In 2018, Stacey Abrams attributed her loss to the gubernatorial race to changes made by then Secretary of State Brian Kemp. In 2020, Donald Trump blamed Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger for voting methods and absentee ballot changes. In 2024, whoever loses will likely look for a similar scapegoat, and these last-minute rule changes may become the reason. Please do not provide additional grounds for confusion or blame. I urge you to take this into consideration and delay your decision on these proposed rules. Thank you.
Thank you, Travis. Appreciate your comments. Next, we have Tawny Adams.
My name is Tawny Adams. I'm the election supervisor in Heard County, Georgia. I'm a member of Gavrio. Imagine, if you will, the national championship football game. Everyone has been anticipating this matchup between the teams for 4 years. Fans of both teams are waiting to take part in the game to root for their side. However, there is a small group of fans who do not like the way the game is being played, so they have decided to approach the 5 commissioners of the Football League to change the rules less than 2 months before the game. 3 of these commissioners think it's a good idea to change the rules, despite the pleadings of the officials on the field who would be the referees and must understand the rules the games the players and fans operate under. The other 2 commissioners have made the point that changing the rules this close to the playing of the game might confuse the players in the field, the referees, and the fans watching the game. The game officials have been told that the rule changes the commissioners have proposed are common sense rule changes. This is all despite the fact that some of the changes the fans in the peanut gallery have proposed violate the official rules of the game as written by the overarching body who determines the final say of how the game is played. Some of the rules contain changes the commissioners are not even allowed to make because they lack the statutory authority to make those changes. So despite the pleas of their fellow commissioners, the referees on the field, the concerned fans, they decide to go forward with these changes. The game time approaches, and no one is sure what the rules are because of all the confusion the new rules have caused. The game is played. As the action unfolds, the referees do their best to implement the new rules. However, the confusion with the new rules causes there to be irregularities. During the post-game news conference, the media asked the commissioners why there was so much confusion on the field. In response, the commissioners who proposed the new rules so close to the game say that the new rules were common sense rules. So the problem must have been with the officials tasked with their implementation. Is this what will happen when confusion leads to inconsistencies with the November 5th, 2024 election? Who will be given the blame when new rules cause chaos?
Thank you, Tony. Appreciate your comments. Let's go ahead and add some more folks on the line, please. Matt Rowac, Milton Kidd, Joseph Kirk, Julie Adams, and Ethan Compton, please. If you guys will get in line, that'd be great, very helpful. I didn't think I called everybody. Okay, Kevin Muldowney, you got the floor.
Good morning. Kevin Muldowney. Worked as a poll worker, poll watcher, at poll tech, absentee ballot adjudication. I firmly support the proposed rules before this board and sincerely want to thank you all for your hard work. These rules will give much needed support, transparency, and clarity to existing Georgia election law. We are, after all, a constitutional republic. We are governed by laws, and clarity of those laws is of utmost importance. It's hard to imagine how anyone interested in free and fair elections could oppose any of them. Gavrio, a suspiciously partisan group, is trying to make any argument they can to stop the process. These proposed rules will increase confidence in our voting process and will be virtually invisible to the voters' experience. On to the issue of an election monitoring team for Fulton County. The very reason an election oversight team was ever considered was due to the fact of documented and very real manipulation of past elections by Fulton County Elections Department. Both Ryan Germany and the Carter Center have gone on record praising the supposed accuracy and perfect result of the 2020 election. That in itself completely disqualifies both of these entities. If the decision is made after fully adjudicating Rossi Moncla, then that we do in fact need a monitoring team. That team should be carefully chosen and approved by this board in its entirety. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin, very much. Your timing was great. Thank you for your comments. Okay, next up we have Kathleen Hamill. And Matt, you're on deck.
Good morning. My name is Kathleen Hamill, and I'm here today on behalf of the nonpartisan Georgia Democracy Task Force. We believe deeply in the integrity of our current voting system. Our system is safe, it is secure, not perfect, it has stood the test of time. But today, I must express our grave concern over the proposed 11 rules. These rules threaten to upend our election process in just 46 days. The earliest these rules could take effect is October 14th. That's 1 week after counties begin mailing absentee ballots. It is 1 day before early voting starts, and it is long after overseas and military ballots must be mailed, which is by September 21st, tomorrow. This timeline is not just tight, it is impossible. Imagine the uncertainty and the confusion and the added burden on election workers and county budgets. These rules do not protect our elections, they undermine them. Our Georgia election laws are among the most robust in the nation. They have been tested, they have been audited, they work. The U.S. Supreme Court has warned us about this very situation. In the Purcell decision, the court cautioned against last-minute rule changes. Such changes confuse voters, they erode trust, they compromise election integrity. We, the Georgia Democracy Task Force, cannot stand by and allow this 11th hour attempt to thwart our system. It is undisputed that your job is to represent all voters in the state of Georgia and to ensure fair, legal, and orderly elections. These last-minute rule changes make it impossible for you to fulfill that duty. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen, and we appreciate your comments. Next up, we have Matt Rowac. Milton Kidd, you're on deck.
All right, good morning, Board. First of all, as a Georgia voter, and especially since I'm a Fulton County voter, I'm very much in support of the rules before you today. They make a whole lot of logical sense, and I'd ask for your approval today. And many of the comments before not once have talked about ensuring the accuracy of the election. And there is evidence of previous issues that we could talk about for pretty much all day. Secondly, watching the Gabrielle Group's behavior, in my opinion, you're losing credibility. Let me give you an example. The claim that counting the number of physical ballots as a means of reconciliation undermines confidence. So is it Gabrielle's official position that you do not believe in reconciliation? Let's pretend for a second that Georgia and the United States and many countries around the world hasn't done this for decades upon decades upon decades, and outside the U.S., centuries upon centuries. Let's pretend that someone appears at the bank. They give 5 $20 bills, and the bank gives you a deposit slip of $80. You say, I gave you $100. The teller says, the receipt says 80. You say, well, count the bills I gave you. The teller responds, I'm sorry, that's no longer our procedure. The person says, well, will you do reconciliation at the end of the day? They say, no, sorry, that's no longer our procedure either. But I gave you $100. Sorry, sir. Receipt says $80. And if you want an example of evidence, let me remind you of what happened in 2022 in DeKalb in the primary. This very rule would have prevented Michelle Long Spears, who ended up in last, when they counted the physical ballots, which this rule isn't even counting the results, it's just the ballots themselves, went from last place with about 3,000 votes to over 6,500 votes, and she won the race. This rule is very important. It makes a lot of sense, and you would never advocate for no reconciliation in your daily lives because you would be raising hell. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Muldowney. Thank you for your comments. Next up, we have Milton Kidd.
My name is Milton Kidd. I'm the elections director for Douglas County. I have a full set of my responses to the proposed rules, but I'm going to throw that out. History is watching. The world is watching. What we do here today matters, and what we do here today is important. To the last commenter, we do reconciliation. Every elections office does reconciliation. Not physically counting the ballots by poll workers that have worked 16 hours and getting an accurate count, because they're just counting the physical ballots themselves. They're not tabulating results. So that's not reconciliation. The idea that you're not going to listen to the individuals that are charged with conducting elections is absurd to me. For the board members that want to implement these rules, because they're most likely going to implement them because they have the numbers, I challenge you to go into any county in the state of Georgia and to do the rules that you're passing on today. Work as a poll worker all day and then count the ballots. We all have given our lives. Most of us work decades in these career paths. And to say that we don't know what we're talking about, you wouldn't say that to any other professional. I've stayed at a lot of Waffle Houses in my life, but that does not qualify me to operate a Waffle House. Listen to the experts. You can't even make this up. The world is watching what we do here today. The world is going to hold us accountable for the decisions that we make. It matters. If this is how we're governing ourselves, let's be adults in the room and not push partisan ideology and partisan issues. Let's make rules that make sense and listen to the people. Let the people vote.
Okay. Let me just say for the record, that was not a paid advertisement for Waffle House.
Thank you for your comments, Milton. Okay, next up we have Joseph Kirk. Let's go ahead and get these are the last ones on the list for today's speaking. No applause, please.
Yes, please, no applause.
Sandy Shepke, Richard Schroeder, Kristen Neighbors, and Cyra Draper. Please get in line. And that'll conclude today's comments after those folks have spoken.
That'll conclude the morning comment session.
Yes.
We will have an afternoon comment session.
Yes. Joseph Kirk, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Joseph Kirk. I'm the election supervisor from Bartow County. I've been in that position since 2007. I'm also the president-elect of Gavrio. Like my other members that are here today, I'm here to speak on behalf of myself, not my organization. But I would like to flag that Gavrio did submit comments about proposed rules. I'm not going to step through each rule today, but I do welcome folks to read those comments. If you do, you will see, for example, we have never stood against reconciliation just in the procedure outlined in rule. There's other ways to do it. What I'm here to do today is to alert y'all that in my professional opinion, these rules go beyond the statutory authority of the board. And from what I've heard this morning, both the Secretary of State and the Attorney General have advised you of pretty much the same thing. The idea of passing rules on the assumption that someone would stop you if you were wrong is no different than an unqualified voter or a person applying for a ballot on the assumption that my office is going to stop them if they can't vote. And I've had to turn folks into y'all for that before. I ask that rather than pass the rules today, that you slow down and work with us as election professionals to craft rules that work within the law, rather than attempting to fill perceived gaps in the law, acknowledge the practical realities of modern election administration, achieve the goals as efficiently as possible, and are passed outside of a 90-day quiet period before any regularly scheduled election. As my colleagues mentioned, the election has already begun. We need to focus on a smooth and orderly election that is conducted in accordance with state law and federal law. We need to focus on instructing our employees and citizens what the rules are and what to expect. And unless there is a true emergency, we need time to put any new procedures in place. I'm here to tell you that time has already passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. Next up, we have Julie Adams.
Good morning. So, first of all, I want to thank the SEB members, and we all know that this is a civic duty that you're doing, and we appreciate the time and energy that you have put in and the thoughtfulness. I think that you all are considering some great rules. And I'm really, really interested in all these comments on how harsh this is going to be for our elections. Because as I look at the rules today, we have ones that post things that are elections data for the public to see. We have more poll watchers in the tabulation center. And then the one that is the big complaint is counting the ballots in the polling locations. So I know it's already been mentioned here before, but I want to stress that if you go into the bank, if you drive home on the way to the bank and you go in and say, I want $1,000, a machine is going to count the $1,000. The teller is going to hand count to make sure it's $1,000. And you as the banker, the person or the bankee, I guess, coming in to get the money are going to count and make sure it's $1,000. I don't understand the reconciliation of these ballots and the counting and all the kickback that it's getting. But I just want to say I appreciate all these laws are lawful. They fall within the law. They provide more accuracy and transparency. And I'm interested why we have so many people questioning them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie. We appreciate your comments. Next up is Ethan Compton.
I'm Ethan Compton. I'm a concerned citizen of Wilcox County and the election supervisor of Irwin County. So far this year, rules passed by this board have cost the voters of Irwin County 5 cents per voter. If passed, rules under consideration today could cost them up to 65 cents per voter. That adds up across the millions of voters across Georgia. Almost over 200 pages of elections code and rules have been implemented since 2020. We have practiced on them. We have trained. We are prepared. We are ready. Do not change this at the last second. To bring back the football reference that Supervisor Adams brought up, it's not 2 minutes before the game. Military ballots have already been issued. We have started. The election has begun. We are in the middle of voting. This is not the time to change the rules. That will only lower the integrity of our elections and lower the integrity of what we do. Personally, there are 159 counties, and they each have different methods to comply with the law. My county does hand reconcile our ballots. We are blessed with the resources to be able to do so. We do hand count to make sure each precinct matches up. What we don't do is this rules opinion to have it done at the end of a 16-plus hour day with tired poll workers that will only invite inaccuracy and will be done without maintaining a secure chain of custody. Don't break my seals. Don't break my chain of custody. What we do, we have the poll watcher's view, we log it, we log the seals on the ballot container and bring it back to our office. The public is open to observe our hand reconciliation, where we do match up per precinct, exactly how the rule says, into batches of 50. And we make sure that those seals are not tampered with. I have a difference in opinion on this rule because you're violating the integrity of those ballots. You're violating the chain of custody. Others have other perfectly good reasons, but trying to have this be counted at the end of an election day will only invite errors. Please vote no. Please work with us. Try to make sure that these rules are more carefully thought out to be successful ones that we can implement correctly. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Ethan. We appreciate that. Sandy, you're up next, and you've got Richard on deck.
Good morning, board members. I've never done this before, so I'm very excited to be here. I'm a Fulton County voter, and I like to express the need for a good monitoring team for Fulton County for this election. The Ryan German proposal is full of rot and conflict of interest, and the same old playbook of the narrative that everything is fine in Fulton County is not the case. I will give you an example of what's going on in Fulton elections now. In their training for their poll workers, they're telling them not to ask questions when if they ask questions, they will get dinged. And we all know what happens when we get dinged. That means letting them go. They're being told essentially that if someone walks into a poll and doesn't look like the picture of the person in the ID, that they're supposed to not ask questions. Does that sound like a county that's improved or firmly committed to following the law? The same county where two of its election board members are on lawsuit against this body, the same board of members in 2022 that recertified the results with zero documentation in front of them. A good monitoring team is needed. Lastly, the rules that are before you today, I think are excellent and should be approved. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Sandy. You did a great job. Appreciate you. All right, next up we got Richard and Kristen Neighbors, you're on deck. And Cyra, you're going to black clean up. So thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
I'm Richard Schroeder. First of all, this isn't my speech. I'm a U.S. Army veteran. I took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States of America. I'm also a poll worker in Hall County. I'm the tabulator lead. I take the paper ballots out of the tabulator, put them in a container. I'll stay till as long as it takes to count those ballots and make our elections better. Not going to what I got. Following the 2020 election, there was a significant lack of confidence in Georgia election systems, with many electors concerned about allegations of rampant voter fraud. This sentence is in this book probably 100 times. They put it as an editor's note after just about every law. They had to address the problems that were evident in the 2020 election. The changes made in this legislation in 2021 are designed to address the lack of elector confidence in the election system. I appreciate this current board and the progress in obtaining these goals for fair elections. However, the latest efforts last summer from our legislator does little to address the issues that plague our voting system today. We're still using the vulnerable electronic voting machines. We're running elections through an illegal QR code and sealing the electors' readable ballots, as in 300, into containers that are stored in various locations around the state with questionable chain of custody in place. Going back to last December, we had a SEB meeting on December 20th when Garland Favorito and Marlon Marks was petitioning the board. There was hardly a dozen people in attendance, much unlike the previous day when the room was packed out. There was a motion to make the sealed paper ballots available to the County Board of Elections and to the public. The motion died with no second the motion from the rest of the board. The current board has come a long way since that fateful day in December. We're actually passing rules that will make our elections more transparent and believable. These changes promote improvements for future elections. The motion to unseal the paper-readable ballots from the previous elections will not only address the confidence and integrity of our elections, but it could actually be the key to the questionable outcome that created the mistrust of the public. I make a plea today for this board to pass the motion, unseal our readable paper ballots, let us see our votes. Thank you for my time.
Thank you for your comments, Richard. Next up, we have Kristen Neighbors and Cyra Draper on deck.
Thank you, Board. My name is Kristen Neighbors. I'm the State Director for All Voting is Local Action. We're a nonpartisan organization that advocates for policies and legislative priorities that expand voter access. I'm here today to add my voice to the many election officials who have raised concerns regarding the two rules proposed by Charlene Alexander, which would require hand counts on every voting day. I've brought with me 1,872 pages of paper representing what a stack of ballots could look like on a busy counting day. And busier, larger precincts may have even more than this number. If I were to hand this stack of paper to 3 random people in this room, especially at the end of a long voting day, and ask them to arrive at the same total number, do we think that's feasible? Because I personally don't think that's very feasible. Asking our Asking our election workers to do this on every voting day is asking for errors. I've personally watched multiple counties conduct full hand counts over the past year. It's normal that many times an hour we can expect small errors to be made, the type of thing where someone's count is off by 1 or 2. This would result in having to count again. We'll also see mistakes where someone says one number when they mean a different one, which can lead to tallies seeming not to match when they actually do. I've also seen more significant errors made, including when one county added up their early vote numbers and the totals were significantly off by about 10%. It took them 3 tries with a weekend of rest in between to tally the numbers correctly, and this was for a race with 2,200 ballots, so not much bigger than the stack here today. I have someone helping me hold the stack because I was too worried it would fall on the floor and make a mess. Like, imagine if those were ballots. None of the errors I've ever witnessed have been due to a machine problem or any type of voter malfeasance. In every single case, it's been a human error. Counting large numbers of anything one by one is an incredibly tedious process and not one humans are well equipped for. People doing a hand count are going to make mistakes, which can then be exploited to spread lies and sow further distrust in our elections and our election officials. It's worth noting that a number of election officials have gone on record recently about the threats they've been facing from activists who don't believe our elections are fair. Passing this rule is just going to add fuel to that fire. I urge you to reject these proposals. Thank you.
We appreciate your comments, Kristen. Next up, we have Cyra Draper to finish the morning.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Cyra Draper. I'm the state representative for House District 90. And as I've listened to the comments today, I think a lot about what it means to act in good faith. As a legislator, especially on the minority side, on the minority party side, I try to approach all my conversations with my colleagues in good faith and assuming that they are also operating in good faith, because I believe that even when there are policy differences, you can reach a middle ground. And I think a lot of people here today that have testified and given commentary have presumed you are approaching this issue with good faith. And they have presented to you all of the operational issues, logistical issues, practicalities of implementing these rules so close to election days. And I'm blown away by the number of election professionals, nonpartisan election professionals that have put their names on the line to come up here and talk to you today. Because I have been following the state election board for many, many, many years, and I have never seen a reaction to a slate of rules like what I am witnessing today. But I have to say, we're talking about poll workers that have already been trained, right? We are talking about all these last-minute changes, and it makes me question whether members of this board are operating in good faith. Here is what I think is happening, because I know there's a bunch of really nice suits and we're in a really nice building, but at the end of the day, I think putting 11, maybe 12 rules into play days before Election Day is a grift. I think what is happening is we are setting up our counties to fail. Why do we know they're going to fail? Because they are telling you that. They are telling you they cannot implement these rules with the time we have left and with the funds they do not have. They're telling you that. And when these counties fail, when there are inaccuracies, if there is a result of the election that some of the members of this board do not like, they will be able to point to those inaccuracies and they will say that that the election is inaccurate, that there is a lack of integrity in the election. I think the bottom line is, if your purported goal is to bring accuracy and integrity to our election, we now have an overwhelming mountain of evidence that these rules will not achieve that goal. So what are we trying to do here? We're trying to sow chaos. We're trying to invite disruption by putting our counties up to fail. And I think that is exactly what is happening here. I hope you prove me wrong. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
How many total people do we have?
Coming up.
Yeah, total sign-ups.
She's got about 25, 28 more.
All right. There were 53 people that signed up to speak. On the agenda, we had allotted for 30 to speak in the morning, and then the remainder at the end of the meeting. We've gone through the first 30 people, and I appreciate your comments. The board appreciates your comments. At this time, before we start diving into these rules, the chair would entertain a comfort break.
So moved.
We have a motion for a 10-minute comfort break. Do we have a second? All those in favor signify by saying aye. The motion carries 4-0. We'll have a 10-minute comfort break. Thank you. and put a little order in this. So we're going to ask the petitioners to come up and speak to the petition and give them 10 minutes for yourself and whoever else you want to speak on your behalf for the petitions. And then we'll reserve time after that for the board to ask questions or if the board wants to hear from anybody else. We won't be taking public comments unless the board wants somebody in the audience to speak. And the board can ask for whoever they want to, obviously. But so if the board identifies somebody to speak, we'll listen to them. So we're going to try 10 minutes. We've heard all these petitions before, so we're not plowing new ground here. So 10 minutes with the petitioners, and then the board will ask any questions or listen to any other speakers that they want to hear, either pro or against the petitions themselves. Okay, and once again, let's observe all rules of courtesy and kindness and respect. I just ask you to be nice to people. So the first one is a discussion and voting on proposed rule, the amendment to SEB Rule 183-1-12-.12, tabulating results. Subject to the rules, hand counting presentation from Charlene Alexander and Janelle King, member of the board, Janelle King.
I am a 34-year resident of Fayette County, and I want to make it very clear that every time I have presented a petition, I am presenting it as an individual and not on behalf of any organization or any other individual. I find it amazing that since most of us in many of our counties on this hand count of ballots, we did it. I don't know about the rest of you, but I've heard from a number of counties that we used to always hand count. Since 2020, we hand counted the ballots on Election Day, and we also did it during early voting. So I don't understand why this big uproar is going on, and we didn't think that it added that much time. One thing I do want to say is there's a lot of misunderstanding of this rule. We are not saying that we are tabulating those ballots. We are strictly counting the number of ballots that come out of that scanner. And I'm going to show you something because I don't understand how this goes. But let's say this is a stack of ballots, all right? The paper might be a little bit thicker. All you're going to do is you can take a finger glove or a Stop Quick, that licky stuff, and all you're going to do is these are going to come in, they're going to be upside down, you could be looking at the back, it doesn't matter, you're pulling them out of a pile, and you're strictly going to go to the corner and you're just going to count those ballots. Now, how difficult is that? That is not a big deal. I mean, in my opinion, that's not a big deal. So, and you should be thankful. I mean, if everything is so good, and we're back there and we are counting these ballots, and 3 of them come up with the same amount, and it agrees with the scanner, great. Have you ever heard the term cross-check, which we have in the airlines, we have all over the place? Cross-check means that we are verifying a set of numbers or a discussion by using another means. That's all we're doing. We are strictly saying that the ballots came out of the scanner, and we are going to say this is the total number of ballots. It is not that difficult. I don't know why you keep saying that there's going to be errors. You put them in stacks of 50 and cross-lay them. The reason you do that is as you put those stacks of 50 together and you count them and you go to the total count, let's say you come up and one of you has 1 or 2 different than the other 2. It's very easy to go through a stack of 50 and find the one that's missing. That has happened, but you keep going until you have it. So I think there's just been a whole lot of misunderstanding about this rule. You're blowing it way out of proportion. I have been a poll worker, poll watcher, and I've been an assistant manager. I have done these counts. And I just don't understand why you're fighting it like you are. The taxpayers pay your job, for you to do your job, and, you know, you want to ensure that everything is correct. That's all we're asking, is that you are double-checking the ballots that came out. I'm going to turn this over, since we're under a 10-minute guideline, and we've discussed this many times. I have the good fortune that one of several co-authors of the Help America Vote Act is here with us today. And I'm going to introduce Mr. Harry Hari, and he's going to explain to you the concepts of chain of custody as well as paper audit trails. Thank you, Harry.
As introduced, my name is Harry Howry. I've been active in elections since the 1990s. Most people don't know it, but the Help America Vote Act was written by people from Missouri, and I happen to be from Missouri. That was John Ashcroft and Paul DiGregorio and one private individual that was a casual cyber and operational consultant. That was me. So there were hundreds of people involved. We got involved first in Bush v. Gore. And the goal of the Help America Vote Act was very simple. We didn't want to have litigation. We wanted to have a pristine election system. The concept behind HAVA, or the Help America Vote Act, was to create a system that was self-proving. That implies the ability to audit and reconcile. What we find here across the whole country is a lack of reconciliation or control points. Anybody that has an experience in auditing, and I have both financial auditing experience and cyber forensic auditing experience, knows that you have to have control measures so that you can figure out what happened when there's an error. Most people don't understand this, but in 2022, the official election results in Georgia still have a 39,000 vote discrepancy between the official number of voters and the official number of votes. I am not saying that that was an error in the count. I'm saying that the control systems are not working. There have been a lot of things done in Georgia to improve this situation. I will acknowledge that we have professionals that have no particular iron in the fire that are doing election work all over the country. We have to acknowledge their professionalism, but at the same time, as Alexander Hamilton and James Madison started, they said our election system is intrinsically adversarial. It is designed so that I don't have to trust you and you don't have to trust me as Republicans or Democrats, and neither one of us have to trust the bureaucrats. That is the way the system was designed. We get caught up in this whole narrative that somehow we're insulting or replacing the election workers. There are a lot of great people out there. They should be, congratulated on the great work that they do, but at the same time, we have to have provable systems. This is about provable systems. One of the easiest places to start the reconciliation is by comparing the number of ballots manually to what the machines are telling us we have. It's easier to find the error at the beginning than it is at the end. Who has ever tried to balance a whole year's worth of journal entries or accounting entries for their small business? You don't do it at the end, you do it at the beginning, or else you're going to have many sleepless nights as you try to reconcile the two. The example with the banking system of counting and recounting the money is an example of zero trust. I don't have to trust the cashier or the teller, and they don't have to trust me. Both of us compare the results. And when they don't agree, what do? We figure out why they don't agree on the spot, and it's solved. Now, the estimate, I don't want to impugn the numbers, but the idea that to do what we're talking about, simply counting the ballots, takes 65 cents a ballot is outrageous. It's not going to take 65 cents a ballot to do this kind of counting. It's not going to interfere or impugn. If the mechanical systems are correct, great. but we'll know for sure that starting the process of counting and tabulating the ballots starts from a good and sound foundation. We have this problem in many, many other ways, but the idea that we break chain of custody by simply opening a system and counting them is nonsense. You might need sign-offs, you might need attestations, you may need dual oversight to make sure that nobody's doing anything that they shouldn't be doing, but we do this all the time. We do it with adjudication, we do it with provisional reconciliation, and then we have things like mail-in ballots that we're not doing anything with to determine whether all the mail-in ballots even got into the system to count. So I would recommend very strongly that this is not an abrogation of chain of custody. If it's done properly, it's a very small impediment to the system, a very small amount of labor, and it gives you a very good reconciliation of the count of the ballots in the system. And from our perspective, my perspective, any type of system that improves accountability and improves auditability, which is a requirement, by the way, under HAVA, all auditable items are supposed to be maintained. What does that mean, all auditable items? It actually is a performance-based standard. It's saying that if you can audit this item, you have to maintain the information to be able to audit the item. It makes no other sense otherwise. You don't create an audit system, you don't create a financial control system by arbitrarily saying, well, we're going to monitor our memos and our journal entries, but we're not going to pay any attention at all to accounts payable. This is what we're talking about here. Controls that make sure that the system is pristine and clean from the beginning. If it costs a little bit of money, you know, this is an issue, obviously, that has to be grappled with, but the fact of the matter is a non-provable election is what is eating the country up right now. We have to protect all of the people's rights. This isn't about denying entry into the system. This is about making sure that we come up with a result that we all can trust. And I would suggest that you all consider strongly passing these particular resolutions.
Amen. Come on.
You stay here.
Ms. Alexander, you have about a minute left.
Okay, you're going to ask questions?
Well, the board then will, if they have questions, they'll ask them.
The other thing that we have to keep in mind is we're not counting the ballots every single day. And I know there have been a lot of numbers that have been tossed out. I've looked at the numbers, the ones that I could get. Understand that when we're talking about whether it's election day or early voting, we are talking about drilling it down from registered voters to estimated turnout, and then you are breaking it down by the precincts, and you're taking it on down to election day. You all know that roughly 20% vote on election day. You take that, Fulton County, 432 precincts, take that 20% of your turnout and divide it by 432. Trust me, there were not any precincts that I found in 22 in Fulton that were over 1,700 people showed up on election day. We're not talking about doing 5,000 on one day. If so, 3 is the minimum. 3 is the minimum. You can always bring in more, as long as we can control them. So, that's my minute.
Thank you, Ms. Alexander. Are there comments from the board or questions from the board? Member Gazal. And I ask the board, please, one at a time, and I'll try and keep an eye on who wants to speak and keep this an orderly process. So.
Has anybody conducted a survey of precincts across the state to understand whether or not there's even the physical capacity? Because this is one of the concerns that I've heard from election supervisors, that they just don't have the space to do this in a way that is secure. Have you spoken with election supervisors about the implementation of this?
Yes. Not all of them, of course. There are some that won't even talk to me. But have I talked to the ones that I know? And I've watched it happen in my county and in some of our surrounding counties. And you're just not talking about a big deal. You have to have tables to bring the people in, and so you check them in. You've got tables there where you've used the poll pads. You can move the poll pads off, and that's what you do as soon as you close the polls, and you've got tables right there. We're not asking people to turn those ballots up so you can see them. It's however they come out of the scanner. You're just going to take and put them so that you can count them. Do I think we did it. I mean, I don't understand, because across the state, most of the counties in 2020 up through October of 2022, they did exactly what these rules asked for. And we didn't hear any complaints then about not having room.
The complaints that I have heard are that the late date, the resources, the time, and the fact that there are extremely strict statutory requirements of getting other information uploaded to the state. And that has been the reason that I understand the state recommended not doing this at the precinct, is because it was leading, it was not done in a way that was accurate. There were problems with it. They tried this and it failed. And I am going to defer to the 159 counties and the election experts who actually conduct elections and have done so for decades. And I'm going to rely on their expertise, because I have not conducted an election. I know a lot. I'm an attorney. I'm an election law attorney. I've observed elections across the globe. And I know that the 159 counties have professionals that we owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to. I think that the aspersions that have been cast...
We're not going to cheer for election officials today.
The aspersions that have been cast upon our election professionals, who are wholly nonpartisan, to suggest that they are partisan actors because they articulate the problems that they're facing, is a gross understanding of what the burdens and duties of election officials are. And, sorry, I don't mean to get y'all in trouble. And the fact of the matter is, if we pass a rule, they're required to adhere to it, and they're telling us that they can't. They're telling us that this is a problem. We're hearing that this is also beyond the scope of our statutory authority. So I understand chain of custody. I understand the checks and balances very well, and I know that reconciliation is conducted throughout the day, comparing voters checked in, comparing ballots that are printed out, and the number of ballots that have been scanned into the tabulator. That is cross-checked multiple times throughout the day to suggest that we don't believe in reconciliation, because this rule that would come into force the day before early voting starts is a gross mischaracterization.
Member King.
All right. I do have a question for you, Member Gazan. When you say they and all, are you stating that every election worker and official is against this rule? I'm asking a question.
I'm stating that everyone that I have heard from personally is against it. There may well be some who support this. I have not received any support from an election supervisor. I have not received any messages supporting this from an election supervisor. Poll workers, yes, but poll workers are not responsible for the entire county, and they will not be held responsible for violations of this rule.
So what you're saying is that your poll workers, there are some poll workers that are in support of this, the individuals that will actually have to do it. And then you're also saying that, are you not including Ms. Charlene as one of those election officials?
I'm talking about the people who actually run the elections and are responsible for running the elections day to day.
Okay.
And also, Ms. Alexander is here in her personal capacity, not representing the board.
Well, I would hope that there isn't anyone that's just standing up here representing everyone, especially when there are differences of opinions. That being said, just to be clear, this rule is referring to election day only, correct?
The first one, yes, ma'am.
This rule, on average, as you stated, the 1,700 ballots that you saw that was in one precinct in Fulton County.
2022.
In 2022. We did amend this rule, to be clear. This rule was an amendment that we basically said that those who have 750 ballots or more can come in the next day or the next business day, whichever, whatever it is. Either way, they can come in and they can count throughout the certification week. That's how we amended it. When it comes to counting these ballots on election day, are we talking about an average of 250? What's the average number of ballots that we have in each precinct?
I'd have to go back and look. I had to pull every precinct, and I pulled about 10 counties, Gwinnett, Fayette.
Okay.
And I don't know that I could tell you the average because it varies precinct to precinct in each county.
Of the 10 that you pulled 10 counties of various different sizes, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Any other comments from the board? Member Johnston.
Thank you for your presentation. First, let me address the issue of timing, since there were 30 speakers and everyone that was against the rules, I believe, expressed their concern about timing for passing this rule or any rule just before an election. First, I take pause with Gabrielle suggesting to alter the Administrative Procedures Act that says in rulemaking that rules are adopted and become effective in 20 days. It's not appropriate for Gabrielle to say we want it to be 60 days or 90 days. If that's the case, then there probably needs to be some legislative changes. But as far as passing rules close to an election, I did a little homework, and I looked in our state election board rules. I think we have maybe 69 or 59 rules. And I'll share with you Rule 183.16.02, voter registration, was adopted on October 29th, 2009. Rule 183.6.04, accessibility for the elderly and handicapped, was passed on September 18th and made effective on October 8th. Rule 183.112.06, handling of voting systems, adopted on 10/18 and made effective on 11/7. Rule 183.12.08, logic and accuracy testing, adopted on 9/22/2021, effective 10/12/2021. Rule 183.112.11, conducting elections, adopted on 9/22/2021, effective 10/12/2021. Tabulating results, adopted on 9/22/2021, effective 10/12/2021. Provisional ballots, adopted on 9/22/2021, effective 10/12/2021. Handling spooled absentee ballots, adopted on 9/16/2020, effective 10/6/2020. Eligibility of application for absentee ballot, adopted on 9/22/2021, effective 10/12/2021. Notification of absentee ballot rejection, adopted 8/31/2020, effective 8/31/2020. Early absentee ballot processing, 9/22/2021, effective 10/12/2021. Audit, audit procedure, adopted on 9/24/2020, effective 10/14/2020. Emergency rules were adopted in 2020. Emergency Rule 183-14-.06 through .14, that would be 8 rules, adopted on 4/15/2020, effective 4/15/2020, just before a primary. Rule 183-1-14.7 through .15, that would be 6 rules, effective, adopted 5/18/2020, and effective the same day. So, and there are more. So the hue and cry about how early or how late it is to be adopting these rules, I don't buy. This is, rulemaking is good any month of the year, and as I look through the rules, actually the rules are adopted and made effective throughout the year, every month of the year. There's no exception. A good rule is good. Now, when it's effective may have an effect on whether it applies to a particular election. But I think the concern about timing probably should be thought about a little more carefully. Now, as far as this particular petition, my question is, Mr. Howery, is the failure to count the paper ballots a failure of compliance with HAVA?
So there are many different ways that the objectives of HAVA can be met, but the idea that you can allow systems to ingest ballots without control points violates both HAVA and the security controls associated with the way that the machines are being used under the Federal Information Security Modernization Act. You're required under both of these to have auditability. And so when you dispense with anything that would provide control points, then you don't have auditability. This is a natural piece of auditing. So anybody that is familiar, CPAs or cyber people here, know what I'm talking about with regard to control points. So if you have no control points, you have no auditability. And so back to your question, if you don't have a mechanism of providing control over these systems, you don't comply with HAVA.
I'm not sure how we could have control if we're not counting the ballots at the point of opening the ballot box, where you're breaking the chain of custody.
Yeah, I agree. There's no way to do something quickly that would resolve this issue. This is a relatively light impact on the system, and it doesn't. There was a comment made about whether or not late rulemakings are appropriate. Generally speaking, when you're talking about enfranchising or disenfranchising people, this is where the judges generally get a little bit skittish about whether or not a late rulemaking is appropriate. But something that's purely operational like this, with zero enfranchisement impact, has no basis for delay. It simply does nothing to change the basic concept of counting the votes. Now, you have to have chain of custody procedures that are protecting the ballots, but that's a foregone conclusion and already done in the existing system.
Thank you. So this rule would not impact voter experience?
No, it shouldn't at all.
Okay. I have read many complaints about a delay in the counting or delay in election night reporting. But the fact of the matter is, it's not the ballots that are counted on election night. It's the memory cards that are counted. And my understanding is runners take the memory cards to the election office or to designated law enforcement or to designated employees, election workers. I see an election worker shaking her head. But it's the memory cards that tabulation occurs with. Correct. Please.
No, not unless Dr. Johnson would like to hear from one of you.
Please. Sure.
Press your button so I can. All right.
So thank you for hearing from me. Rebecca Anglin from Greene County. So this varies county by county. What my county does is not what a neighboring county does. Many counties do not have the ability to run the memory card or have these runners that you speak of or have sheriff's deputies. What I do in my county is not what my neighboring county does. They do not have the resources to do that. So to say that it would not cause delays on election night is not true or accurate. It will cause delays for certain counties. Now, my county does it one way, and we will get our results in. What my neighboring county does, they do not have the resources to do it the same way I do it, and they have to wait at the precinct because the manager and both assistants, or the manager and one, because it has to be under dual control, they have to bring the results back. So you're waiting until everything has been counted. They have to keep those ballots with them and that memory card with them. That would break chain of custody if they did opposite of that. So if they do not stay together, fill out their chain of custody, have that memory card, have those ballots with them, and drive it back to precinct, you are waiting until all of this has been done election night before it gets back to that office. And you're talking about counties with multiple precincts. We're not talking about a small county. I'm in a small county. We're talking about counties with larger capacities and many precincts. If they're not implementing something like what I do at my county, you're talking about 12, 15, 20, 30 precincts that you are waiting on. It will definitely delay results on election night.
I'm going to have to get a bigger gavel.
So, so when the ballot box is open, the chain of custody is broken, and I have worked as a poll worker, and I have crawled into those ballot boxes to get the ballots out, and I see them strewn all over the floor, and it takes a certain amount of time just to do that, and to put them back together and tap them and get them straightened. It's not like the pristine pile that somebody walked up here with. It's like 52 card pickup, but I think that's the moment when these ballots could be put on the table and counted. And as I spoke last month, I looked at several counties at their election day ballot cast, and the numbers were not that great. And as the trend continues to move toward early in-person voting, the election day vote ballots cast actually becomes smaller and smaller, and so I think the time to do that and bring all the equipment together, that's what we're trying to work for. What I'm trying to work for is some uniformity, and if some counties are counting ballots and others are not, it's not uniform. Now, how you get them to the polling place, there's certainly options and choices for county supervisors to use. But counting the ballots, if you're not doing that, then I fear that we're not providing equal protection. okay? And that's very important. That one county is providing the provable, auditable trail, and another county is not. And if you ever want to do an audit, a risk limiting audit, or if you need to do a recount and you have not counted those pieces of paper, and then you open the batch and the number of ballots is not the same, what do you do? How do you remedy that? What's the remedy? Because you didn't count it in the first place. How do you reconcile that? So there is a reason to have a cross-check, a double-check. There's a reason the ballots are being touched. I've heard complaints that, oh my gosh, so many hands touching the ballots. Well, I'll tell you what, their hands are touching the ballots, because I've been there at the end of early voting and at the end of election night, and the ballots, you're dragging them out of that box, and they're all over the floor, and there are a lot of hands touching them, but that's not bad. It's just that you're trying to restore the order and follow the process that's called for. But it's the perfect time to count the ballots anyway. And it's better to do it in the beginning than try to do it at the end when you don't have a remedy for a miscount. And yeah, you might get it wrong the first time. You counted 49 instead of 50. But you do it again until you get it right. It's easy. Nothing to it. So, this petition, for a rule, does not affect the voter experience. It does affect the election workers, and I appreciate the young man that said that he does count, but that means that if somebody else is not counting, we're not treating the election the same. We're not uniform in how we conduct the election, and we are tasked to make sure that there's uniformity in all of the counties. I'll yield.
Mr. Chair. Member Jeffries, do you have any comments that you'd like to make? Member King.
So during early voting, at the end of the night, let me backtrack. When I worked for the state party and I did data work, what would happen is at the end of early voting, we had a group of people who were going out doing door knocking, and so that we weren't disturbing people who had already voted, we would use the data from the Secretary of State's office that showed who had already voted early or submitted their absentee, and remove them off of our rolls so that we wouldn't knock on their door because they've already voted. So during early voting process, or early voting, at the end of each night, there was a form of reconciliation for those who were tracking data throughout the election process. We had, if something came up and there was a problem, you had a couple more days to address it in live time, and at that time. I was recently given a perfect example of why I think election day counting for sure is necessary. Here's why. So a gentleman, this is a true story, there was a gentleman who walked into their polling place. They voted, they got the printout, and then they asked if they could take a picture of their vote before they put it into the scanner. They were denied. Unfortunately, this man did something that's against the law, but he ran out and decided not to put his scanner, his document in the scanner, his ballot in the scanner. That would mean that the poll pad number would be different from the scanner number, right? So when we're talking about, during early voting, if I saw that, I would have a couple of more days to call and say, hey, why doesn't this number match? What's the problem? On election day, it's a little different. The data that will come up, obviously you have your certification week, but it's a little different. So I believe that particularly on election day, having one additional step to ensure that there's an understanding on a precinct level as to why our numbers are either matching or not matching, because that's an example of how the numbers could be a little off. And there are people that do not trust the machines. So there are people that would like to have a record of some sort of their ballot, although that's not permissible. But that particular situation could occur, and it can occur several times over. To Dr. Jan's point, should we not have those extra days like we do with early voting, where we can go through, look at the data, see what's happened the day before, what happened a couple of days before? We're now at the mercy of addressing this issue on a statewide level. And that will cause, if we want to talk about chaos, I mean, we are still, to this day, talking about things that took place, not just in 2020, but also in 2018, because we're trying to comb through from a statewide level. So I personally, the reason why I amended this rule personally was because I did take into consideration the fact that people were working long hours. And I did feel like if you have over 750 ballots, now that number came from looking at the average that we discussed prior to amending of how many ballots at the most all the way down to the least per precinct. And what we found was that there was maybe 1,700 in one precinct in Fulton. I think the greater number was, next greater number was 750. And then at that point, it dropped down to about 300, and it kept going.
300 to 500.
Right.
Yes.
300 to 500, and it just kept going. So that's why I amended that, because I did feel like counting 1,700 ballots after working 18 hours or 16 hours is a long time. So that was amended. That being said, I do not want to continue, and I say continue because as I listened to speakers, we had one speaker state that there was 31 counts of fraud, but then in the same conversation, the same message said that there was no fraud. And I get confused when I hear stuff like that. However, what I don't want to do is set a precedent that we are okay with speed over accuracy. A delay of any sort, whether it be a couple of hours, I can guarantee you as a voter, I would rather wait another hour to ensure that the count is accurate than to get a count or get a number within that hour and then to find out at the close of an election, after certification has already taken place, that we have people suing because the count was not accurate. Not only that, we have people who are upset about the whole concept of the reasonable inquiry, but we're also saying that we do not want to ensure that our numbers are accurate enough to push these numbers to our county board members and then have them sign that legal document that they are held accountable for, that they will be charged with a felony if the count is incorrect, because the document says accurate and perfect. So I think that what we're doing is creating more stability in our election process. We're also putting our county board members in position to certify with confidence, since that's the big concern. And again, we're counting election day only ballots. If it extends it for a short period of time, let's do so that we can be accurate across the state. Now, I know there are counties that are doing this to perfection. I know that for a fact. And I am sorry that there is a slight impact on you because you have to almost bear the brunt of the counties that are not. However, to Dr. Jan's comments, uniformity does matter, and it does create foundational stability.
Any further comments from the board?
Yes.
Dr. Johnson?
Just to remind the attendees here, California counts their ballots, the largest state in the country. Illinois counts their ballots. Massachusetts and Alabama count their ballots, and all of Canada counts its ballots. This is not an unknown or an unused process as far as elections go. And this is the opportunity to pick up on the errors, such as perhaps an occasional machine malfunction, as reported in DeKalb County when the ballot design created a problem and the numbers came up wrong. If they had counted the ballots, they would have immediately recognized that there was a problem. So I think that's important to know. To share with this group, in the last presidential election, Columbia County on election day had ballot counts in the 300 to 400 range. That's not an unbearable number of ballots to count. Paulding County had ballot totals in the 500 to 700 range. Cobb County had 480 ballots average on election day. And similarly, actually during advanced voting, now I think 4 years ago things may have been skewed toward absentee by mail because of COVID, but even during early voting, the number of ballots per day, per scanner, is very, very workable. Cherokee County had 287, with a large number of, at one precinct of 1,400. So the checks that I could find suggest that this is not an unreasonable number. I think the delay would be warranted, and it would provide that auditable control feature that one would strive to have to be compliant with HAVA. And oddly enough, when we do a recount, the option is either now it's machine, but there can be a request for a hand count for a recount. So what are you doing? You're counting the ballots by hand. The RLA, or the audit that we're using now, is a hand count. It's also a tabulation, but you're also hand counting the ballots. So anyway, I will yield for others.
Any further comments by the board? Member Jeffries?
I'm good.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
I have a few comments,
okay.
if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Ms. Alexander, I appreciate you submitting this petition. I really do. It's given this board a lot to think about. I think that there's some gold in it, a little bit of it. I disagree with some things that I want to talk about. And I've received more comments from this, I think, than any other rule that we've tried to pass so far. And if I were to count them, which I haven't, it would probably come up 50-50 pro and against, but the overwhelming number of election officials that have reached out to me have been opposed to this. And I, for one, greatly appreciate the comments made by the election officials, because they're the ones that have to run this election on a day-to-day basis and have to staff those facilities and hire those poll workers. And so I appreciate their comments, and they're the ones that have to deal with whatever rules we put into place. There are several things that concern me about this. Number one, I do think it's too close to the election. I do. I think that it's too late to train a lot of poll workers that have already started their training processes, and to go back and have to retrain them on something like this. I think there's a lack of resources in many counties to effectuate this rule, and the cost we hadn't discussed about the extra workers, the time for that, just hiring extra workers to do something like this if it's necessary. I think there's significant chain of custody issues, because now you're talking about if you wait till the second day to try and count these things, well, then you're putting them in a box, taking them someplace else, taking them out of a box, you're counting them, you're putting them back in a box. It's just a lot of chain of custody issues that I have concern over. But most importantly, I believe that this is not supported at all in statute. This body, this board, is an administrative body. It's not a legislative body. If the legislature had wanted this, they would have put it in statute. It's not in statute. You can't read any place in statute where this is. This board is not here to make law. We're here to interpret law, and I don't see any place in statute where we're interpreting the hand counting of ballots after they come out of the machine. And therefore, I don't know if you're clapping for me or Waffle House, but that's okay. But it's just not supported in statute. We have received guidance from the Secretary of State and from the Attorney General's office that say it's not supported in statute. If this board votes to implement this rule, I think that we put ourselves in legal jeopardy by taking this rule. I think that the more appropriate course of action for this board would be to send a proposal to the legislature. If we believe in this, then let's send a proposal to the legislature and ask them to enact this. You know, let's let the legislature do their job. We don't need to do the job for them. That would be my comments on this. We know the legislature is not shy of passing laws, whether you like them or not. But you know, they need to do their job. So this board needs to take seriously the guidance that we've received from the Attorney General, from the Secretary of State's office, and from the election professionals across this state that have opined on this particular rule. For that reason, I will oppose this. Like I said, I don't disagree with what you're trying to do. The mechanics of it bother me significantly, especially when it comes to statute. I will always follow the legislature on these types of issues.
What about HAVA? Do you agree that you should be compliant with HAVA and the other federal laws?
Well, I am going to pass the buck to the legislature on all of this. So, are there any other comments from the board?
One further.
Yes, Dr. Johnson.
One further comment. In OCGA 21.2, the definition of ballot is 21.2.2 is official ballot or paper ballot. In 21.2.434, as the election code describes counting paper ballots, it says only official ballots shall be deposited in the ballot box and counted. 21.2.437 says after the polls have closed, the ballots shall then be counted one by one and a record made of the total. So one could argue that we do have an electronic voting system, Dominion, but it was sold to the state of Georgia that it produces a paper ballot. So indeed, you know, we actually have a voting system that uses a paper ballot, and these statutes should apply. 434 and 437. After the polls have closed, the ballots shall then be counted one by one and a record made of the total. So if we're following that statute, because we tell the citizens of Georgia that we have paper ballots, then we're not following Georgia code. Now, there is a separate section that deals with ballot marking devices and the ballot summaries that are printed out. But we call those the official paper ballot. So we should be counting the paper ballots.
I'm going to disagree with you a little bit on that because counting a ballot and counting a piece of paper are two different things. And this rule has us counting a piece of paper. This rule has us counting pieces of paper, not counting ballots.
This is not tabulating. I'm not talking about tabulating. I'm talking about counting the ballots.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Member King.
I just want to point out that according to our Georgia code, the role of the state election board, part of our role is to promulgate rules and regulations to define uniform and non-discriminatory standards. As we stated several times, having some counties counting by hand and some counties not does not establish uniformity. This rule will do that, and we do have the ability to do that. We would not be breaking any statutes.
Well, it says in accordance with the law and with the existing statute, I believe. And if there's no statute support for this.
Can you show that to me, Mr. Chairman?
Did you?
I just read it.
Did you read the Attorney General's opinion?
I just read it out loud. I'm not talking about the Attorney General's opinion. I'm talking about what is in our Georgia election code book.
Okay. Yeah. Are there any further comments by this board? Chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to adopt the petition by Ms. Alexander for Rule 183-1-12-.12, tabulating results.
We have a motion to adopt this rule. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Member Gazal.
As a matter of statutory interpretation, the provisions that deal with paper ballots predate even the DRE system. Those dealt with paper ballots that were deposited in a box that did not tabulate, and they do not apply currently. So just to make sure they do not apply to the current system.
We have precedent. We can do this.
Any further discussion?
No.
My last comment is this board voting in affirmative. I want to make on the record that we'll be going against the advice of our legal counsel by voting in the affirmative. We will have no further discussion. We'll have a vote by voice.
Before we vote by voice, my discussion is that, Mr. Chairman, I have to point out that every time you make a statement that this could be against the law, you are welcoming lawsuits that will be dismissed, lawsuits that we know will be dismissed. I just read in our code what we can and can't do, undisputed. So I just want to be on record stating that I really am getting a little tired of encouraging lawsuits. We can vote.
I will not correct your comments. We have a motion and a second. We will vote by a voice vote by order of seniority. Member Gazal, how do you vote?
Nay.
Member Johnston, how do you vote?
Aye.
Member Jeffries, how do you vote? Aye. Member King, how do you vote?
Aye.
The chair will exercise his right to vote and will vote nay. The motion passes 3-2. Not true. Not true.
We just were told that all those cases are going to be dismissed. Are you really doing this?
What?
It's not good, man. You got to stop this.
Next item on the agenda is discussion and voting on proposed rule amendment to SCB Rule 183-1-14, -.02, advanced voting subject to the rule absentee